Okay, welcome back to you guys. Nice to have you back. Welcome to everyone online who's joining as well. We're going to move forward in our program here, helping you guys to understand this next topic of what is enlightenment. This is going to help you to be able to better understand what this mental state is and be able to more easily navigate your way to it and know that you've actually gotten to enlightenment once your mind is actually enlightened. As we go, I'm going to pause a few times. You'll kind of see how I do this, where I'll open up the questions that you guys might have. So feel free to ask questions when we get to that period. As you guys know here, if you could use the microphones, and online you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, or in Zoom you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. The first thing to teach you about this topic of what is enlightenment is to help you understand that it's a challenge for you at this point in your journey to be able to understand what enlightenment is. That I can sit here and explain it to you all day long, and you're still not going to understand it 100% at the end of our conversation. It's kind of like if you've never had chocolate ice cream before, and I sat here and explained to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like. At the end of our conversation, you'd know more about what chocolate ice cream tastes like, but you're not going to know fully what it tastes like until you actually experience it and taste it yourself. So it's the same thing with enlightenment. I can sit here and explain it to you all day long, and you'll have a better understanding of it after we're done today, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're actually experiencing more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. So just understand that right up front. But you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. So it's challenging for the unenlightened mind to fully and deeply understand it. It is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. That's what he's guiding you to. Everything that he taught was to be able to help you get to this enlightened mental state. So now I'll teach you guys what this is. What enlightenment is it's a mental state that you can attain in this life, or you can attain it at death as well, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state that you can attain. The mind is stable, steady, it's unshakable. The mind can't be shaken up for any reason whatsoever. No matter what's happening around you, your mind's still focused, concentrated. You have clarity of mind and deep memory. You'll notice that your mind doesn't experience things like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and all these other feelings. You won't experience any of these things because the mind will be completely purified. So the enlightened mental state, it's a mental state. Your mind will be calm, it'll be relaxed, but yet attentive and alert. Because sometimes when we think about calm and relaxed, we think about, I'm so calm and relaxed, right? But no, it's not that kind of relaxed. It's calm and relaxed, but it's attentive, it's alert, it's crisp. The mind's very crisp in the enlightened mental state, that it's focused and concentrated. So when you get to enlightenment, you can get to enlightenment in this life, or some people can get to it at death. But ideally, you would get to it in this life, because then you'll enjoy the rest of your life in this enlightened mental state. But the next best option would be to experience enlightenment at death, because at least if you get to enlightenment at death, you won't experience rebirth. Now, everything in the teachings of the Buddha are independently verifiable. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha whatsoever, including the cycle of rebirth. And he teaches the 5 realms of existence as well. He teaches hell, animal realm, afflicted spirits, which are like ghosts. There's humans, and then there's heavenly beings. All of these things are independently verifiable, but it's usually not something you approach when you first start on your journey to enlightenment. In volume 11, chapter 105, I have 17 different criteria of how you can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because it's not something you usually approach when you first get started. But just understand, when you're learning a topic like this, or any other of the topics of the Buddha, you might hear me mention rebirth every once in a while, because that is what the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand. What I encourage people to do is set aside the topic of the cycle of rebirth when you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment, because what's happened in the past is in the past. It doesn't matter anymore. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It hasn't happened yet. So what you would like to focus on is the present moment. Right now, you're in the human realm. Your mind experiences discontentedness, and you'd like to solve that, right? So if you focus on that, that's what's important. And then usually about a year and a half, 2 years into a person's journey, they start to focus on developing their understanding of the cycle of rebirth. But you're going to hear me talk about rebirth every once in a while, just kind of mention it. But I don't usually go into a lot of detail in this class unless people ask specific questions. And even then, I don't really go into a whole lot of detail because you really need to get the foundational teachings first. But by the time someone gets to enlightenment, they will no longer experience rebirth. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life, but there's plenty of evidence to be able to see that you actually are experiencing continuous birth over and over and over again. You just might not have looked at that, and you might not have connected those dots yet. So enlightened mental state is something that you experience in this life, and then there won't be any rebirth after this life. The way that this is occurring is through freeing the mind of what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. You're going to learn about this on Wednesday morning. This is called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is a high-level description of what's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. These 3 pollutions are going to get in more detail here in a moment. I'm going to explain to you what's called the 10 fetters. So these craving, anger, and ignorance is what the mind needs to be purified from. By having craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, it's going to stay stuck in this unenlightened state. So it's through eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance and practicing the wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom that's going to transform the mind and bring it into this enlightened mental state. One of the ways that we talk about enlightenment is we talk about attaining enlightenment, right? But another way to think about it is that your mind is already enlightened, but you have these pollutions that are in the way that are hindering you from being able to experience it. So when you peel away these pollutions, the qualities of enlightenment can shine through more and more. And those pollutions are these 3 poisons, or these 3 unwholesome roots. But at a more detailed level, it's called the 10 fetters, which you'll see here in a moment. So this is actually more in line with what you experience in your journey to enlightenment, that it's not like your mind is unenlightened, and then there's like a snap of a finger and all of a sudden you're magically enlightened. Instead, the way it is it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And as you're gradually diminishing these pollutions out of the mind and you're gradually increasing the wholesome qualities, you're going to gradually see more and more of the qualities of enlightenment shining through. One of the ways you might think about it is if you had the sun and there was clouds and you started peeling the clouds away, the rays of the sun are going to start shining through. And the same thing is occurring with enlightenment, that as you're peeling away these pollutions, the qualities of enlightenment start shining through. So it's not like you're going to work for 5 years and then magically all of a sudden you're going to get all these qualities of enlightenment. The qualities of enlightenment are going to be enhancing as you're making your way on your journey. I've had some students, even in this class, come in on this 3rd day, the morning, on Wednesday morning, and they say, "My goodness, David, I'm already seeing benefit in learning these teachings. I got an email this morning that normally I would have felt guilty and shameful and frustrated about, but I understood it and I didn't feel those feelings. And this, I can notice that it's from the last 2 days of just understanding what you've taught in just the last 2 days." So that's not everybody that's going to experience that, but I've seen some students that can experience benefit already in just 2 days, right? So these qualities of enlightenment start to gradually shine through as you're diminishing the pollution of the mind. It's like the rays of the sun are shining through. So while we oftentimes talk about it as attaining enlightenment, one of the things you might think about is that the mind is already enlightened and it's just getting these pollutions out of the way to allow you to experience those qualities. So the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind. It's where you're working to eliminate the causes and conditions that are keeping it in the unenlightened state. Where enlightenment itself is the mental state, the path to enlightenment is the purification of the mind, the training of the mind, the elimination of the causes and conditions that are producing the discontentedness. Now, some people refer to enlightenment as ultimate bliss or ultimate happiness, and I don't describe it this way, even though there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, but it's different than the happiness that you experience now. Right now, you probably experience conditional happiness, that based on some condition, you will then be happy. right? If it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. If your bank account balance is up here, you're happy. If your mom and dad do something specific, you'll be happy. If you have a certain car or a certain house, you'll be happy, right? This is called conditional happiness. There needs to be some condition met in order for you to be happy. If someone speaks to you polite and kind, friendly and respectful, you will be happy, right? There's a condition that needs to be met in order for that happiness to occur. And that type of happiness is temporary. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. And individuals will experience this in the unenlightened state. But in the enlightened mental state, you're not experiencing conditional happiness. You're experiencing unconditional happiness, where there doesn't need to be any condition met for the happiness to exist in the mind. The mind is cheerful, it's bright, it's radiant, it's uplifted, and there doesn't need to be any condition met for that to occur. You wake up in the morning happy and joyful. All day long, you're happy and joyful. And then when you go to sleep, you're still happy and joyful. It doesn't matter what's happening in your day-to-day life. You can maintain your happiness and your joy. So what people are describing here when they talk about enlightenment as this ultimate bliss is they're describing what you experience in something that's called the first jhana. When you get into this first jhana, which there's 4 jhanas, these are preliminary phases that your mind goes through on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. When you get into this first jhana, there's these enhanced qualities of mind that you experience. And one of the things that you can experience is this ultimate bliss, where there's all this excitement and bliss in the mind. And oftentimes what people are experiencing is these jhanas, and they think they're actually enlightened, because the difference of being off the path to enlightenment to being in the jhanas, it's like night and day, because there's these enhanced qualities that you experience. And you probably had no idea that your mind is even capable of experiencing these qualities that you experience in the jhanas. So when someone gets into the jhanas, if they don't understand the path to enlightenment and what the Buddha taught, when they're experiencing that ultimate bliss of the jhanas, they can oftentimes think that they're enlightened, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. This is where sometimes you can hear people that they will tell you enlightened beings still experience sadness, or still experience annoyment or frustration or agitation. This is because somebody's in the jhanas thinking that they're enlightened. They're not enlightened, and they're still experiencing sadness and frustration, and they're explaining what they're experiencing as enlightenment. But I can assure you, enlightened beings don't experience anger and sadness and frustration and annoyment and all these other feelings that are talked about. That an enlightened being doesn't experience those kinds of things. So sometimes people can be in the jhanas thinking that they're enlightened, and then they will describe that as enlightenment, when in reality they're not actually enlightened yet. So if you hear someone describing enlightenment as ultimate bliss, what they're describing is actually the jhanas, these preliminary phases that your mind goes through, where there's enhanced qualities of mind before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. Okay, so there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, but I wouldn't describe it as ultimate bliss. It's more cheerfulness, gladness. The mind is uplifted, it's bright, it's cheerful, and it's persistent in the mind. It doesn't fade away. It's just there all day long, and you don't have to do anything for that to occur. You wake up all day long and you go to sleep with this cheerfulness and gladness, this uplifted mind that's just always there. In terms of the advantages of getting to enlightenment, is you'll notice that the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. That the mind is unshakable. There's nothing that can shake up your mind. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world around you. Your mind can maintain its focus, its concentration, its clarity, and deep memory. These are qualities that you experience through purification of the mind, because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing the muddle-mindedness, right? When you have these pollutions in your mind, you'll lack concentration and focus and clarity and memory, because the mind's not performing optimally. But when you get rid of these pollutions, your mind can perform optimally, and you'll notice this high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that you don't experience any of these discontent feelings. You'll hear me talk about this many times. This whole list of feelings: anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this and others are eliminated. Even the slightest little ickiness in the mind is eliminated by the time you get to enlightenment. You're not uncomfortable about anything whatsoever. And this comes through purification of the mind and training of the mind. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the world and the world that you live in. You'll have wisdom that other people don't have, that you'll understand how the world functions. Right now, you might look at the news sometimes, or you might hear something that's going on in one of your family events or one of your family members, and you might just say, I don't understand why those people keep doing that over and over and over again, right? This is because your mind doesn't understand how the world functions. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have deep wisdom to understand why every single thing is happening around you and in the world. You'll understand this world. That's what the Buddha is doing. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And now you'll have that deep wisdom of how the world is constructed. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you'll struggle and you'll have difficulties. That's what the stress and the anxiety is. That's what the frustration and the agitation and annoyance is. The mind's struggling because it's living in a world that it doesn't understand. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have deep wisdom about how the world functions around you through these natural laws that the Buddha taught. So you'll have that wisdom. And you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody around you. That there isn't any situation where you wouldn't be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. Right now, you probably find that to be a challenge. There's probably certain situations where you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have that any longer. Your mind will be completely purified where you can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody in every situation. And you'll notice that you're not causing any harm to other beings in the world. You're not causing any harm to anybody's physical possession or physical body or material possessions or people's reputation. And because you're not causing harm and you're being polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody, you'll see that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. They're at ease. Where in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of bitterness and hostility in your mind, and that's going to come out from time to time in your relationships, and it damages your relationships. And when you put that out, that's what comes back to you. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody, and you'll see that your relationships really blossom, both personally and professionally. They'll be at ease, where you won't have those difficulties and struggles in your relationships any longer. And this is happening through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. There's certain teachings that you're going to need to learn as a core, central, fundamental, foundational teachings. And you're going to learn pretty much all of these in this course. It's the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. You're going to learn all of these thoroughly in this class. But learning it is one thing. Then you need to reflect on it, to independently verify it, and then you need to practice it. That's where the real work happens, right? You're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and instantly implement these teachings. It's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress to bring this into your life more and more and gradually get rid of these pollutions out of the mind. Then you're going to need to learn the Brahma Viharas, which I taught that yesterday in the group learning program for any of you guys that participated in that. I'm going to be kind of introducing that and kind of mentioning it. I won't call it the Brahma Viharas, but there is a point in time where in this course I kind of mention it slightly, but this is something that you will need. It's in chapter 14 of this book, and I've taught it many times, so there's recordings on it, so you could learn the Brahma Viharas. Then there's the 10 fetters, which I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment, but ultimately you're going to need to know those in detail. Then there's the 7 factors of enlightenment, and there's extensive meditation training that you're going to need. And you'll get that started here this week where you're learning breathing mindfulness meditation. But there's other meditations that you need as well. And whenever you're learning any of these teachings from the Buddha, it's important that you don't believe any of his teachings, because belief is not going to get you to enlightenment. With belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody either convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. You need to learn his teachings. investigate them and examine them. You need to then reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you need to practice his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. So you're not a follower, you're not a devotee or anything like that. You're an independent practitioner looking for the truth, looking to cultivate wisdom. A teacher like me, I'm just a tour guide. I'm just pointing out for you the things that you need to learn. But you in your own journey in life, I'm providing the resources, I'm providing the courses and the classes, the personal guidance. I'm providing all these things for you, but it's you that is the one who's actively working forward on this path to cultivate the wisdom. So you're not interested in believing anything. You're not following anybody. You're looking to cultivate wisdom so you can make decisions for yourself in your day-to-day life. So you won't see the Buddha giving you a bunch of rules or commandments. You won't see him trying to convince you of anything. It's you that is seeking that wisdom. And when you understand this wisdom that he taught, you'll see that it works to improve the condition of your mind in your life. And that comes through your growth and development of learning, reflecting, and practicing to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. So any questions so far on what we're talking about here with what enlightenment is? Yep.
So my question is about physical pain. Mm-hmm. So does the enlightened mind still experience physical pain in the same sense? Mm-hmm. Like, because a friend of mine told me about this, I think Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire in protest, mm-hmm. and he didn't make a sound. He looked very peaceful.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's stuck in my mind, like how somebody can be in that state of mind. Like, let's say I have physical pain and as a result I'm suffering. Do I still feel happy and joyful, and do I ignore the pain? Mm-hmm. How does it work?
Sure, I'll explain that to you. So as an enlightened being, and by the way, that person who set themselves on fire, I can assure you they weren't enlightened, because an enlightened being wouldn't set themselves on fire. That's very unwise to do something like that. But nonetheless, an enlightened being experiences physical pain, but not in the same way as an unenlightened being. In the unenlightened state, you're going to experience the physical pain, but then you're going to experience the mental anguish that goes along with that, where the mind craves permanent comfort of the body. So when you experience, like, say you stump your toe, you're going to notice the physical pain, and then the mind, because of its craving for permanent comfort of the body, it's going to experience mental anguish as well. And that's where someone might be angry and frustrated, and it actually heightens the physical pain because there's a craving in the mind for permanent comfort. The Buddha describes it as getting hit by two darts. You get hit with the first dart, which is the physical pain, and you notice that, and then there's the second dart that comes, which is the mental pain, the mental anguish, because there's a craving for permanent comfort. So now there's this mental anguish in the mind. An enlightened being doesn't experience the second dart. They experience the first dart. They experience the physical pain, but they don't experience the mental anguish. So in the unenlightened state, if you stump your toe and you feel the physical pain, and then the mental anguish comes in, and you're frustrated and angry, and oh my God, who put this chair in the hallway? And you're maybe blaming other people, and it actually makes the pain more because you're experiencing a heightened level of pain. As an enlightened being, if you stump your toe, you might actually start even laughing. You might start rubbing it because you understand that this is impermanent. This physical body is not permanent, and you will experience discomfort in the physical body sometimes. It's not going to be permanently comfortable. But the physical pain you experience in the enlightened mental state, because it's just the physical pain and not the mental anguish, it's very muted. It's very minimal by the time you're enlightened. You'll just experience a minimal amount of physical pain. And you actually need this as a human being. Because if you were, say, for example, enlightened, and you were standing too close to a fire, like a bonfire or something like that, and you didn't experience physical pain, you wouldn't know to move away from the fire. But by being to the point where you have just a little bit of physical pain, you're like, oh, there's the fire. I should move away, right? So you need that little bit of physical pain just to know that something's off in the body so you can take action to fix it. So it's very muted by the time you get to enlightenment. But that person who set themselves on fire, I can assure you they weren't enlightened because this person had a craving for death. right? By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have craving, longing, yearning for permanent life, but you don't have craving for non-existence either. The Buddha talks about this, that you don't have craving for existence, you don't have craving for non-existence. Your mind is in the middle, where you're content with your life. This person setting themselves on fire, they had a craving for something to happen in the world, and they were protesting in order to try to convince people to do things their way. And they weren't happy with how things were going in the world, and they thought by setting themselves on fire that that's going to convince somebody else to do something their way. And this shows that the individual wasn't enlightened yet, but apparently they weren't experiencing so much physical pain. They were at least able to manage that, but they weren't enlightened at that point, because an enlightened being wouldn't set themselves on fire. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in on YouTube. Let's see what this is. Let's see. I am a Buddhist, and do you know that the inner Buddhahood is called... Okay, the Buddha never taught anything called Buddhahood. This isn't a teaching from the Buddha. There's people out there that will teach you that everybody is a Buddha, right? This is what some people are teaching. The Buddha never taught this. The Buddha taught that it's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. And you're going to see why in a moment, because I'm going to show you the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. But there's some people in the world that they think everybody's a Buddha. And this just isn't true. The Buddha never taught that. He didn't teach that you have Buddhahood or that you have Buddha nature or anything like that. But he did teach that you can get to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be a Buddha at that point. And you'll understand why when you understand the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. Okay, let me see if we have anything in Facebook. Okay, I don't see anything in Facebook. All right, so now let's talk about the 10 fetters, because everything the Buddha is helping you to be able to do is to be able to eliminate these 10 fetters out of the mind. That's what produces enlightenment, is purifying the mind of these 10 fetters. So I'm going to introduce you to these 10 fetters so that you at least are aware of what they are. And then I'm going to teach you throughout the entire course of how to build up a foundational practice to work towards eliminating these. At some point, you're going to need to know these in a lot more detail than what I'm going to teach you today. And I have various courses that will build you up to that. By the time you get to a retreat that I teach each August, I spend about an hour to an hour and a half talking about each one of these fetters. I explain to you what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. But what I'm going to do today is just introduce you to them so that you'll at least be aware of what the Buddha is guiding you to eliminate from the mind. And then we're going to start building all the teachings, the foundational teachings that are going to help you to be able to eliminate these from the mind. So the lower fetters, it starts with what's called personal existence view. This is where the mind has confusion or misunderstanding, thinking that this body is who you are as a person, or that this mind is who you are as a person. So the mind will cling to a self-image or a self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And if you're being perceived that way, you'll be happy. But if you're not being perceived that way, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. So for example, if you've ever gone to a social situation and you've spilt something on your clothing, like pizza sauce or chocolate ice cream or something like this, you might have been embarrassed in that situation. That's the mind's personal existence view. That embarrassment is arising because the mind is clinging to this body, wanting it to appear to others in a certain way. It's holding on and craving permanence. And this body can't look that way all the time. It's not possible. Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or gray hair, or you started losing your hair, this is the mind's personal existence view, clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, and it can only feel comfortable when you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. And then maybe you've stood in front of your closet and thought about, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear? How do I want to look? And now you might rifle through your clothing to be able to find that special shirt before you go outside, right? So there's all these different things that the mind can cling to in regards to this body, wanting it to appear to others in a certain way. And this is coming from the mind's confusion, thinking that this body is you and who you are as a person. But then you can also cling to a self-identity around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation of I am this, right? Like I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I am a husband, I am a wife. And if you cling to this in your mind as your identity, now when you're in a relationship, you'll feel great. But when you're single, your mind doesn't identify that way. And you might feel like you want to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. Or say you're clinging to an identity based on your nationality, like I am American, or I am German, or I am Argentinian, I am Czech, right? I don't know where all of you guys are from. I am Brazilian, right? You're from Brazil, I think, right? I am Russian, right? If I am. Well, now if you're in a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody says, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle and friendly. I've never heard this before, but this could be something that could happen, right? So somebody might say that, and now if you think like I am American, you're like, wow, they're talking about me, wow, and you feel so pleasurable about this. But now 2 tables over, somebody's going to say something degrading and disparaging because of impermanence. Not everyone's going to talk fondly about the people that come from the place where you come from. So now if you identify with I am American or I am wherever you're from, now you're going to be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So as long as you cling to an identity, you can't be completely peaceful and joyful. So here's another example. Like say I cling to the identity of I am a police officer. Well, as long as I'm doing that work, I feel great. But maybe 10 years, 20 years in, I retire or I get injured or I get fired and I can't do that work anymore. Now you're going to be disgruntled. You're going to feel like less of a person. You're not going to feel whole any longer because that identity is no longer intact. So this personal existence view is the mind clinging to a self-image and or a self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. And now the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And ultimately, you need to uproot this and eliminate this, where you get to the point where you understand this body was born on a land that people refer to as America, but the mind doesn't have to adopt that identity. I don't have to adopt the identity that I am American. I can just understand that this body was born on that land, but this mind doesn't have to adopt that identity. Or I can understand that I perform the role of a Buddhist teacher, but I don't have to adopt the identity of I am a Buddhist teacher, right? Because now when somebody says, all Buddhist teachers are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. Wow, feels so great, right? But then somebody's going to say something disparaging about Buddhist teachers, and now you're angry or frustrated or agitated. So I can understand I perform this role, but that doesn't define who I am as a person, right? So this personal existence view is something you've been accumulating throughout your whole life, right? We have flags and national anthems and sports teams and all these other things that you're out there cheering for these things. Your mind's been conditioned to think that you have this identity in your mind. So we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, but this is called personal existence view. This is a pollution where the mind is holding on to this self-image or self-identity, thinking that this is who you are, where in reality that doesn't define who you are as a person. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. And someone having doubt is quite normal. They come to the path to enlightenment with doubt. But the way you eliminate your doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way that you eliminate doubt is through investigation and examination of the teachings. When you investigate and examine the teachings and you start reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then you practice them and you see that they're actually working to improve the condition of your mind in your life, you'll get to the point where you're beyond your doubt, that there's no more doubt in your mind. But the way you get to that is through examination and investigation of the teachings. You'll gain confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment, because you've seen progress and improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. So you can actually harness this doubt. This doubt is something that needs to be uprooted in in the mind. But initially, when someone first comes to the path to enlightenment, you have doubt. I know I did. I had tons of doubt. I didn't know if this person lived or who he was and what his teachings were. I had all kinds of doubt. But what I did is I harnessed this doubt. I turned this doubt into an inquisitive mind. I was like, you know what? I do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know if they're true or false, but I'm going to find out. And I'm going to sink my teeth into it. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to figure this out. And the more you investigate his teachings, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, that's true. That's true. Oh my goodness, this works. Wow, my relationships are getting better. Wow, I'm sleeping better. Wow, I'm having so much more success in this area and that area of my life. Wow, these teachings actually work. And over a consistent long-term period, you'll eventually get rid of your doubt. And you'll have no doubt that this person lived, that his teachings work, that this community is here to support you, that your teacher has the ability to help you, and that you have the ability to get to enlightenment. Because you see your mind moving in that direction. By the time you get to the elimination of doubt, you won't be enlightened yet, but you'll be well on your way and you'll be able to see that your mind's doing the work. So you won't have any doubt in your ability to get to enlightenment because you're actually doing it. Okay, so that's what doubt is. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. There's two parts of this. Wrong behavior is there's certain moral conduct that an individual in the unenlightened state is doing that is unwise and that is unwholesome. And as long as you're putting out that harmful moral conduct, that means harm is going to be coming back to you. And you're going to need to clean up your moral conduct, not as rules and commandments, but in terms of purifying your mind and understanding that when you cause harm in the world, harm is going to come back to you. So as long as you keep putting out harm through your moral conduct, this harm is going to come back to you. So by the time you eliminate wrong behavior, you've improved your moral conduct to a certain degree, which is based on the Eightfold Path. I'm going to teach you this tomorrow. It's called right speech, right action, and right livelihood. You'll see this tomorrow, and you'll bring your practice up to that point where you're not causing harm to others through your moral conduct, and you'll have eliminated your wrong behavior. This is an area that the Buddha focused his students on because as long as you're putting out harmful moral conduct, harm is coming back to you. It's kind of like if there was a pipe that was spewing oil all over the world, the first thing you would do is shut down the pipe. You wouldn't go clean up the mess on the floor first. You would shut down the oil pipe, right? So it's the same thing as that if you're spewing all this unwise moral conduct into the world, you'd like to shut that down as soon as possible so that then you can go clean up other parts of your life, right? So the Buddha focused students on eliminating their unwise moral conduct early on in their practice. So that's what wrong behavior is bringing your practice up to the level of wholesome moral conduct. Then there's something called wrong observances. What wrong observances is this is where someone might be doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer, thinking that it was going to lead to their enlightenment, where the Buddha didn't teach any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. Whether you choose to do these kinds of things or not, it's a choice for you to make. The Buddha doesn't tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in terms of these kinds of things, but your mind needs to get to the point where you understand that this isn't the way to get to enlightenment. That the number one problem that the Buddha discovered in the mind is a lack of wisdom, confusion, misunderstanding. And the only thing that's going to fix that is wisdom. You need to cultivate wisdom. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer that's going to help you cultivate wisdom. If I sat here and I sprinkled water on you, that's not helping you cultivate wisdom. Or if I tied a string on your wrist, that's not helping you cultivate wisdom. So in order to eliminate this portion of the fetter, your mind needs to understand what is the primary problem and what is the solution. The solution is to eliminate the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer that's going to be able to accomplish that for you. Now, whether you do these things or not, that's your choice, right? Like maybe you're at a family event and your family's going out to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or some other place like this, and you're hanging out with your family and everybody's going out to this event, and then you're going to go out to dinner afterwards. Maybe people are doing rites and rituals and ceremonies at the event, and you're just understanding that they're doing those things, but your mind understands that's not what leads to enlightenment. So it's not about whether you participate in these things or you're around these things. It's about what your mind understands. What is the true problem here and what is the true solution. So the Buddha never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. So if you see those things attributed to the teachings of the Buddha, you know right away that these individuals have misunderstood what the Buddha taught, because you can see it in his teachings very clearly that he never taught any of those kinds of things. There's nothing superstitious or auspicious about his teachings. Then there's something called sensual desire. What this is that the mind has this longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. These are what's called the 6 sense bases, that there's this longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact. So for example, if you were driving in a car and you pulled up to a red light and you heard music that you particularly like, and this is music that you normally listen to, you might be like, wow, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Come on. Right? You might be dancing in your seat, right? Because your sensual desire is getting fulfilled. You're getting contact that you agree with, and you're really excited about that. But then you pull up to the next traffic light, and somebody else comes up next to you with some other kind of music that you don't listen to, and you don't like this music. And now you're frustrated and angry, and you might even be blaming that other person, thinking that they're the ones who are causing this in your mind, where in reality it's your sensual desire that you're wanting to hear permanently agreeable contact, and your mind can only be peaceful in that situation. That's why I was saying you guys have some extra training out here with this saw going on, because you need to be able to not base your emotions and feelings on that and just realize that that's temporary. That's not permanent, right? The same thing is happening not just with the eyes and the ears, but also the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. So for example, if you were walking down the street and you smelled some flowers at a flower shop, and you walk by this flower shop and it's like, wow, that smells amazing. Do you smell that? Those flowers smell outstanding. And maybe you get so excited and happy about that. But then you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer and you're repulsed by it. Oh, that's horrible. That's your sensual desire. Your mind's longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact. And you're not going to be able to get that because you live in an impermanent world. Things are constantly changing. So this sensual desire is part of what's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. And it needs to be eliminated where you don't see contact as agreeable or disagreeable. That you don't have favoring and opposing. It's just contact. It's just a sound. It's impermanent. It's not going to be permanent, right? When your sensual desire is getting fulfilled, you'll get pleasant feelings. You'll get conditioned pleasant feelings. But when it's not getting fulfilled, you'll get painful feelings. And when that's arising, that's where your ill will can come in. Your ill will is your bitterness, your harshness, your hostility. This is where an individual might growl and roar at another being. This is where you become unskillful. It's like, right? This is your ill will arising. And the mind firmly believes that this is coming from something external because it doesn't have the wisdom of these fetters in realizing that it's your own sensual desire that's causing this to arise. If it wasn't for sensual desire, you wouldn't have ill will. But because you have sensual desire and you're getting disagreeable contact, your ill will is arising. And now when your ill will is arising, your bitterness, harshness, and hostility, your moral conduct is such that you're damaging your relationships. So when you eliminate your sensual desire and you're gradually bringing that down, that's going to naturally help you eliminate some of your ill will. But there's actually certain teachings that you can go in and specifically eliminate your ill will. Because ultimately you're going to need to uproot all of these out of your mind. And that's where the peace and the joy comes in. But this is called the lower fetters. It's the first 5. Do you guys have any questions on any of these 5 before I move on to the next ones? Any questions? Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay. So now we'll go to the higher fetters. I'll talk about these 2 together, desire for form and desire for formless, because they're very similar. What desire for form is where you have a desire to exist in a form realm. like the animal realm or the human realm. Those realms, they have physical form, and you have a desire to exist in one of those two realms. What desire for formless is where you have a desire to exist in one of the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly realm. There are people who desire to be in hell, right? There's people who desire to be in the afflicted spirits, which are ghosts. And then, of course, there's plenty of people who have a desire to be in heaven. But none of these existences are permanent. And if your mind is longing, yearning for another existence, then that means you're not content and peaceful in your present existence. The Buddha is teaching you to be content and peaceful in your present existence. If you have a longing, yearning to be in heaven, then that means that you're not content in the present moment. So by the time you eliminate desire for form and desire for formless, you won't have this longing, yearning for existence. But you also won't have a longing, yearning for non-existence either. You'll be in the present moment completely content and peaceful. I don't know about you guys, but one time in my life, I had this longing, yearning to be a bird. I really wanted to be a bird and like fly around and look at everything. I thought that would be so cool to be a bird. But of course, that's a desire for form, right? I wasn't content in the present moment. I wanted to be this other animal, this other being, right? So you need to get to the point where you don't have that longing, yearning for existence, but you don't have longing, yearning for non-existence either. You're content and peaceful in the present moment. And by the time you eliminate this desire for form and desire for formless, you will have eliminated any fear of death. Sometimes people fear death and what may or may not come next. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have any fear in the mind, including the fear of death. So by the time you've eliminated these two, you will have eliminated your fear of death. Then there's something called conceit. Conceit is like arrogance and pride, measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself as being superior or inferior to other people. And now you might walk around with your chest puffed out and boasting and arrogant. And people don't like this, and they'll push you aside, right? Because they're not interested in being around that arrogance and that pride, right? So this is part of what we refer to as the ego. If you've ever heard this word, personal existence view in conceit is what we refer to as the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he rightfully split it out into two separate things because the symptoms that you experience in these two and how to eliminate it is actually different from one to the other. But the combination of these two things is what we refer to as the ego. So conceit is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, looking down on people or looking up to people. And as long as you do this, you're going to talk down to certain people, you're going to talk up to certain people. Your mind's not calm, it's not steady, it's shaken up because of this ego. And you're going to be judgmental, looking at other people and thinking that you're better than they are. So now when you're around someone who you think is below you, when you're talking down to them, they're not going to like that because you're putting yourself above them and now they're going to push you to the side. But if you put yourself below somebody, this is just as detrimental to your mind as well. Maybe you go in to talk to your boss and you're all shaken up around this person. Or maybe if you met a famous politician or a famous celebrity, you may be shaken up around that person. And now when you're in a social situation and your mind's measuring and comparing, you're trying to figure out who's above you and who's below you. If you've ever been to a party and when you walk in, so what do you do? Oh, I'm a doctor. Well, I'm a lawyer, right? It's like everybody's trying to one up each other, right? And trying to look like they're above each other. Well, what kind of house do you have? What kind of car do you have, right? This is the conceit, the ego. And people don't like this and they'll push you aside. So as long as you have this conceit, you're going to walk into environments and your mind's going to be constantly trying to figure out who's above you and who's below you, and you're trying to figure out how to talk to these different people. And what you would like to be able to do is be humble, where you talk to everybody equally. You see somebody outside sweeping the streets, hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Good morning. How are you? Right? You see the king of Thailand walking down the street, which I doubt you're going to see, but if you saw the king of Thailand walking down the street, hello, sir. How are you? Right? You see the queen of Thailand. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good morning. You treat everybody the same. This is where your mind can be at ease because you're not having to figure out how to treat one person versus another. You just treat everybody equally. And now your mind can be peaceful and joyful because you don't have that conceit where you're measuring and comparing people. Where this conceit comes from is in our animal existences, we needed conceit. we wouldn't have survived without conceit. Because when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female. Because they're breeding, they're hunting, they're showing us how to be better wolves. And we needed that. And when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd. Because she was showing us where the food was. She was showing us where the migration paths are. She was showing us where the watering holes were. If we didn't know who was above us in this herd of elephants, we wouldn't have survived. We would have just been roaming around the forest and not being able to know how to survive. So we needed this pecking order in the animal world because it helped us to survive. But in this human world, the mind is still looking for that pecking order and trying to find out what this pecking order is. And you can discard that and get to the point where you just look at everybody as being equal. And that's what's going to bring in the peace and the joy within the mind. So this conceit is something that's very deeply rooted in the mind, and it's going to take a long time for you to eliminate it. So even now, early on, you can notice whenever your mind's trying to judge another person, you can cut that off and not allow the mind to do that. There's very specific teachings around conceit and how to eliminate it. In this first book, it's in volume 1, chapter 16, where I explain it in a lot more detail and how to actually eliminate it. But you need to learn the foundational teachings first. That's why it's in chapter 16. But even now, you can be working on eliminating conceit, where you're not measuring and comparing and judging yourself against other people. Then there's something called restlessness. This is where the mind has overactivity, it has confusion, it has distraction. If you've ever been sitting somewhere and you kind of like bob your knee, or you tap your foot, or you tap your finger, this is because the mind has restlessness, and it's coming out through the body, that you have this overactivity in the mind, and now the body is kind of functioning through that, because the mind is the boss and the body is the employee. The body is just following along. So tapping the foot, tapping the finger, tapping a pencil, this is the overactivity of the mind. So by the time you eliminate this, your mind is completely stable, completely steady. It's unshakable, that you don't have that overactivity of the mind. Then the fetter of all fetters, and the whole reason why any of these other fetters actually exist, is referred to as ignorance. I like to use the phrase unknowing of true reality, because we're translating the words of the Buddha into English, and a Buddha wouldn't talk to somebody in a degrading and disparaging way. And I wouldn't refer to somebody as ignorant. That's like a degrading way to refer to somebody. So this word ignorance isn't really the most accurate word to use. It's better to think of it as the unknowing of true reality, the confusion, the misunderstanding, the lack of wisdom. The mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path. It doesn't understand the 10 fetters, right? It doesn't even understand you have these pollutions. It lacks wisdom. So this is the fetter of all fetters. This is the reason why all the other fetters even exist. If it wasn't for this lack of wisdom or this ignorance, then you would have already eradicated and eliminated all the other fetters. So it's through arising wisdom that is going to eliminate this ignorance. By you cultivating wisdom, you can then learn how to purify the mind. And that's why there aren't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship or prayer on the path to enlightenment, because it doesn't help you to cultivate wisdom. And that's why there's no belief on the path to enlightenment, because you can't believe your way to wisdom. Because belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. So you're always interested in cultivating wisdom, because that's what's going to lead to the elimination of ignorance, where you know the truth, where you don't believe, you're not assuming, you're not forming a perception, you're not just believing what somebody told you, you're not just believing in conspiracy theories, for example. You're learning, you're reflecting, independently verifying, you're practicing to be able to see the truth for yourself, so you know with 100% certainty. So it's the wisdom that's going to eradicate this ignorance. And these are some of the types of teachings that you need in order to be able to eliminate that ignorance through cultivation of wisdom, learning, reflecting, and practicing. So any questions on the 10 fetters, these higher fetters here? Mm-hmm. I heard that.
Yeah. I've been here in Thailand 1 year, and it's really hard to practice personal existence view, and it's hard to practice treating people equally, because I've never lived in a country where there's such a demand for a hierarchy. So, right, like you why elderly people, but you don't why children, and I've been called out for it. Can't wear short shirts in temples. So what you're saying and what you're talking about in the country I'm in right now is doing the opposite.
Yeah. So there's certain culture that is opposite of the teachings of the Buddha sometimes. So the idea of not whying children, this isn't something that the Buddha taught. This is Thai culture. But culture is different from the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha cut through culture. So if somebody's taught you to not why children, that's not what I would teach you. I would teach you to why everybody. Right. So I why children, I why older people, I why everybody. No matter who I see, I show respect to them. But that's not what everyone is practicing, because they don't all practice the natural laws. Even the monks themselves, sometimes if you why them, they won't why you back, because the way they're taught is that they're above you. Right. And this isn't true. This isn't what the Buddha taught. He actually taught that the monks are the lowest level of livelihood that exists in the world. But today, 2,500 years later, with people lacking wisdom of what he taught, people have propped the monks up so high, they're propping themselves up so high, they think that they should only why people older than them and not younger. This is the conceit. So that's what you need to get rid of. So what I would encourage you to do is go around and why everybody. And you're not whying people because you're wanting something back from them. You're whying them because you understand that it's a wise decision, and you're showing respect and gratitude because you know that this is a wise decision for you, and you're working on humbling your mind. So even though you see other people practicing opposite of the teachings of the Buddha, you need to know what's wise and what's unwise and do what's wise, because you're going to see people in the world killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, taking substances that cause heedlessness. And if you just conform to what everyone else is doing, you'll just stay in the darkness with them. But when you understand the wisdom, that's what you're doing here with this 10th fetter, is cultivating the wisdom, you'll rise above the darkness of the world, and you'll experience the peace and joy of enlightenment.
Okay.
You can set that one on the floor, Joe, because then we can change the batteries.
So my other question is, for a country who's predominantly Buddhist, what happened?
So what happened is, from the lifetime of the Buddha 2,500 years ago until now, the teachings initially after the death of the Buddha were strong and vibrant in the world, because when a Buddha exists, the teachings are going to really shine in the world. But then over time they degraded. And the Buddha predicted this during his lifetime. He talked about these 500-year cycles that we would go through. In the first 500-year cycle, he said his teachings would be very strong. Lots of people would be getting to enlightenment essentially. They'd be very strong in their union. The second 500 years, he said people would be doing meditation a lot and really deep into meditation. The third 500 years, he said that scholars would be very interested in what it is that he taught, and they would be writing things about him. And that's exactly what we see. There was a lot of scholarly works during that period of time. The fourth 500 years, he said people would be very generous as it relates to his teachings, and that they would be practicing a lot of generosity in regards to his teachings. And that's what we see. That's when all these temples were built. People were donating massive amounts of land and resources to build these temples. And then the fifth 500 years, which is what we just ended in 2017, he said during that 500 years, people would be utterly confused about what he taught, and they'd be fighting and arguing about what it is that he actually taught, because his teachings, they're in 45 volumes of books that are this thick, and that's what people have had access to. But not everybody studies those, and not everybody even has access to them, because they're in 45 volumes of books that are this thick. that the average Thai person doesn't have access to them because it costs about 3 months of your salary to print them out and to have access to them. And you probably don't have any book collections worth 3 months of your salary, so the average temple, the average Thai person, they don't study on the original words of the Buddha. So this oral tradition that started 2,500 years ago, it slowly degraded because with the oral tradition, it's easy for impermanence to happen because one person tells one person. I don't know if you ever played that game in school, right? Where like I say like the yellow tiger jumped over the pink fence. And then by the time he gets over here, it's like the purple elephant, walked into the ocean, right? It's completely changed, right? So this is what happened with the teachings of the Buddha. And what I'm interested in is seeing the teachings of the Buddha be restored, because I know with 100% certainty his teachings lead to enlightenment. This mental state that he taught, it leads to this mental state for sure. But because the teachings have been so misunderstood and they haven't been available to people, they haven't been able to experience it. So now we're at a perfect time in society where we can actually restore the teachings, because we have an international language which didn't exist during the Buddha's lifetime, where a lot of people speak English. We also have the internet, where we can hit a button and we can send information from one end of the earth to the other, and we can make the books free, where at one time people had to pay extensive amounts of money to print out these 45 volumes of books. And then travel is really easy, so people can travel around and be on one place of the earth to another in about 24 to 48 hours, where these three things didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he wasn't able to spread his teachings as far and wide as we are today. So what happened to the teachings is what the Buddha taught, which is impermanence. They slowly degraded over time. But now we're at a point in time in history where we can restore the teachings, and now we can experience more and more improvement in humanity. But it comes down to each individual person choosing to learn and practice. So here in Thailand, I would say out of the entire world, you have the largest population of people who are practicing the teachings of the Buddha, the closest in terms of what he actually taught. And there's even pockets of Thai people that are practicing based on the original words of the Buddha. The average Thai person is not doing that, but there's definitely pockets of people that are doing that. Like I've been to temples where there's, you'll go there at 4 a.m. in the morning and there's like 20,000 people there, 40,000 people there. So there's, pockets of hundreds of thousands of people here and there that are learning and practicing, and slowly that'll grow over time. And then what I'm looking to do is create that same type of thing, but in the English world, the English speaking world. And by being here in Chiang Mai, it's an international city, so I can teach the entire world, right? We have Russian people, we have people from Czech, we have Germans, we have Argentinians, we have Brazilians, and now the teachings can spread all over the world this way. And then I can live stream as well and reach a lot of other people too. So we're at this pivotal point in time in history where the teachings can be restored, but you're going to see certain people out in the world that aren't practicing these teachings, even if they consider themselves Buddhist. Like this person online here that said, hey, I'm Buddhist. What about Buddhahood? And this isn't actually what the Buddha taught. There's so many misunderstandings out there. So as long as you know what the Buddha taught, though, that's what's important, because you're going to see people out there that are doing things unwise. Sometimes you'll see monks that are using drugs, or I think you have, right? You've seen monks that use drugs or, things like this, and maybe even sexually abuse children or something like that. That's not a monk. That's not what the Buddha taught. And the Buddha teaches that if you see people doing things like this, that person's not a monk. They might be wearing an orange robe, they might be shaving their head, but they're not actually a monk because they're not practicing the way that the Buddha taught. So as long as you know what's wise and unwise, that's what's important, and that's what will lead to your enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else we have to talk about. Let's talk about the 4 stages of enlightenment, because as you're eliminating these fetters, your mind's going to move through these 4 stages of enlightenment. So there's these 4 stages that the Buddha referred to as stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. I refer to them as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment because it's just a lot easier for you to understand. But these words are still in use today, and there's a reason why the Buddha referred to them this way, and it helps you to understand it this way too. So stream enter, it's referred to as the stream enter. It's the first stage of enlightenment, because just like a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. It's just a matter of time. The same thing is true about when you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you are going to get to enlightenment. Your mind won't regress backwards after the first stage of enlightenment. So that's why it's called a stream enterer. Then there's a once returner, or the second stage of enlightenment, because once you get to this stage of enlightenment, if you die, you will come back into the human world one more time, and you will get to enlightenment in that life. That's why it's called a once returner. Then there's a non-returner, which is an individual, if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn into the heavenly world, and then you're going to get to enlightenment in that existence. You don't return back to the human world. Then during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to an enlightened being as an arahant. We would just refer to this person as an enlightened being, where they would refer to this person as an arahant. This is someone who's fully purified their mind. Then there's something called a Buddha, which isn't a stage of enlightenment, but I'll explain to you guys what this is. Okay, so in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment, you would need to eliminate the first three fetters: personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. And having gotten to this first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness will be significantly diminished. Whatever you once experienced in terms of anger and hostility and bitterness and all those other discontent feelings, it'll be a mere fraction of what it once was by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment. And that's why you've been able to eliminate your doubt, because you've seen this significant improvement by the time you've gotten to this particular time. And as I mentioned, if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the human world, but no more than 7 times. But you will get to enlightenment within the next 7 lives. It could be 2 lives, it could be 1 life. You could actually get to this first stage of enlightenment and even get to enlightenment in this life too, right? It doesn't mean that you have to die and come back into the world, but if someone does die in that first stage of enlightenment, they will come back into the world and get to enlightenment in some future life. So some of you guys might have actually been a stream enterer in your past life, and now this is your opportunity to make your way towards enlightenment, right? So an individual who's in this first stage of enlightenment will have a diminishing of discontentedness. They still experience discontentedness, but it's less, and they've eliminated these first 3 fetters. Then, having eliminated those, when you thin out number 4 and 5, your mind will be in the second stage of enlightenment as a once returner. And again, your discontentedness has diminished even further. What it means to thin out number 4 and 5, sensual desire and ill will, it means that it's not as strong as it once was. So if you're noticing that your craving for sexual activity is diminishing, this is a decrease of the sensual desire, that it's thinning out. If you're noticing you're not as angry and hostile and bitter as you once were in your life, that's because your ill will is diminishing. That doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment, but I just give you that as an example. You might have noticed, like when you were in your teenage years or in your 20s, you were a lot more angry and hostile and bitter. And now over the course of your life, maybe that's kind of thinned out a bit, right? That's what we're talking about here, is that your sensual desire and ill will thin out. It's not eliminated yet, but it's thinning out in that second stage by the time you've gotten there. Then there's the third stage, which this individual has eliminated all the 5 lower fetters: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. And they're only experiencing discontentedness about once every 2 months, once every 3 months, once every 6 months. It's very insignificant when it occurs, and it's very infrequent. So you need to be very diligent in this stage of enlightenment, because the mind can have somewhat of a little bit of complacency in there, because the mind doesn't experience much discontentedness. It's just very minimal and very infrequent and very insignificant when it's occurring. So the mind almost ignores it. It can happen for about 30 seconds or a minute. You'll know exactly why it's happening, and you know how to take care of it and cut it off and let it go. But you need to be diligent and observant of the mind, because it's so insignificant and infrequent when it's occurring. If someone dies here, they will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and they will experience enlightenment in that next existence. just like this second stage of enlightenment, an individual will be reborn into the human world, and they will get to enlightenment in that next life if they die in that stage. So some of you guys might have been once returners in your last life, and now this is your opportunity to get to enlightenment. So once somebody has eliminated these 5 fetters, there's very minimal discontentedness in the mind. There's more work to do. There's these higher fetters. But when you eliminate all of these higher fetters, all of the fetters are completely eliminated from the mind. It's been completely purified. That's the mind experiencing enlightenment. You'll notice that it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontentedness, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. It doesn't matter what's happening. Your mind physically is incapable of experiencing something like anger, or frustration, or agitation, or annoyance, or even the slightest little dislike towards another being. And you'll know that this is occurring because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and your mind will be like this, right? So even if you tried to create anger in your mind, you physically can't, because the causes and conditions that have produced that have been uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. It's physically impossible for the mind to experience any kind of discontentedness when it's fully purified like this. So you'll know that your mind is enlightened, but I don't suggest that you ever convince yourself that you're enlightened, because sometimes you can go 3 months or 6 months without any discontentedness, and you'll think you're enlightened, and then you'll experience a little bit of discontentedness, or your ego might arise, right? And if your ego is arising, you're not enlightened yet. So you would like to just never convince yourself you're enlightened, and just stay diligent on the path. And then, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you haven't seen any discontentedness, you'll know that your mind's enlightened, but you'll still be cultivating wisdom, because there's other things in the world to cultivate wisdom about than just the path to enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have full wisdom about the path to enlightenment, but there's other things to learn in the world too. Your mind will be performing optimally at this point. You'll have focus and concentration, that clarity and deep memory. So let's just say you've always been interested in flying a helicopter, but you never did it because you didn't think you were capable of doing it. Well, now your mind's performing optimally. If you like to go learn how to fly a helicopter, go learn how to fly a helicopter, right? Go enjoy that, right? So by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's performing optimally, and you'll experience this complete peace and joy, but just don't convince your mind that you're enlightened, so that way you can continue to grow and develop on the path as you're going forward. Okay, so this is the 4 stages of enlightenment. But then there's something called, oh, by the way, and if you get to the enlightened mental state, you're not reborn anywhere. The Buddha doesn't describe what's next for an enlightened being. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. And I suspect he did this for a specific reason, because he leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He talks about it. And he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he lists this as one of the things he doesn't teach, is what happens for an enlightened being after death. And I have different reasons why I think he didn't teach that. And if you guys are interested in that, I'll share it with you. But essentially, an enlightened being doesn't experience rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But what may or may not come next is an undeclared teaching. And I can share with you my thoughts on that if you guys would like to know. So there's something called a Buddha, which isn't a stage of enlightenment. Sometimes they're very confused about this. It's not a stage of enlightenment. A Buddha is an arahant. They've purified their mind. They're an enlightened being, just like everybody else, but they've done it in a unique way that's different than everybody else. So they meet these criteria, which isn't the same thing for an enlightened being. So an enlightened being and a Buddha are both arahants. It's just that a person who's a Buddha, which is very rare in the world, has gotten to enlightenment without any teachers or guides. They didn't need any help along the way. And this is very rare to experience that. The last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. They would have gotten to enlightenment by themselves. They would have then dedicated the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people would have got to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they would preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people have gotten to enlightenment after that person's death. So these are the 3 main criteria of what makes a Buddha, is they get to enlightenment by themselves, they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment. Then they preserve preserve their teachings so that other people can get to enlightenment after their death. So you can see that you can get to enlightenment, but you won't be a Buddha. You're going to need help. You're going to need guidance along the way. You're not going to be able to figure it out by yourself. And the reason why is because your mind doesn't have this fourth criteria. This fourth criteria is that an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have a deep, profound memory, being able to remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. Even in the unenlightened state, they have a deep, profound memory. They have an unlimited capacity to their mind, where you have a certain limited capacity. You might think of it like a hard drive. You have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, where when you get to your capacity, you need to delete old files in order to store new files. That's the reason why if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories where you can't recall everything that you've been doing in your current life or your past lives too. But in the last 5 or 10 years, you pretty much can remember what you've been doing, what you've been up to. But if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you had to delete those files in order to store these new files. So an individual who's going to become a Buddha, their mind doesn't function that way. They have an unlimited capacity. They can remember countless details, and they put together all that wisdom in their last life to be able to then get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's how they actually do it. Okay. Then by the time an individual gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, they can quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind through spending time with that person. And then they can offer that person teachings that are going to help them to be able to purify their mind. They only do this with their students. They don't give unsolicited guidance to people and tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing. But they have the ability to observe the quality of somebody else's mind and then provide them teachings that are going to actually help them. And this is one of the things that makes a Buddha so so much power and ability to be able to help other people and help countless people get to enlightenment, is because they can observe the condition of someone else's mind by just spending time with them. But they only use that with their students that are interested in the help. Then lastly, an individual who's a Buddha, they will be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they're also practicing those same things too, because they understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So a Buddha isn't going to teach one thing and then do something different. They're going to teach something and then they're going to be practicing that same teaching as well. So they're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings because their students are learning through their actions and the way that they interact in the world. So these are the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And it's very rare to have this type of individual in the world. You can see the words of the Buddha where he talks about how rare this is. We refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. And the reason why is that if you got to enlightenment with the help of any other teacher than a Buddha, you're going to have a certain amount of baggage in your mind. When you get to enlightenment, you've gotten to enlightenment, but you still have maybe 10 or 15 or 20% of the things that you're doing didn't actually lead to your enlightenment, but you're still doing those things just out of respect for your teacher. But by the time someone gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, they don't have that. If they try a certain meditation and it doesn't work to help improve the condition of their mind, they will discard it. Right? And then if they try a meditation and it's working, they know that this is part of the path to enlightenment and they keep that meditation. So by the time they get to enlightenment, they know the path to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards. And then they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path for other people to be able to see how to get to enlightenment. But an individual who's enlightened, who learned from a teacher who's not a Buddha, they will still have a couple of things that they're doing that didn't actually contribute to their enlightenment, but they're still doing those things. So that's why we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards. They've discarded anything that didn't lead to their enlightenment in terms of the path to enlightenment. They know other things, right? They might know how to turn a screwdriver and, know how to play hopscotch and stuff like this, right? But that's not the path to enlightenment. In terms of the path to enlightenment, they know it inside and out, backwards and forwards. So this is a fully, perfectly enlightened one. Now, I'll share with you one more thing. is how to know that you're not enlightened. This is a way to know what enlightenment is, right? Is to know how you're not enlightened. If you're still experiencing discontentedness, then you know that your mind is not enlightened, right? And what I'm talking about here is conditioned feelings. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll experience plenty of happiness. It's just going to be unconditioned, right? But if you still experience conditional pleasant feelings, conditional painful feelings, conditional neither painful nor pleasant, then your mind is not enlightened. So if you get annoyed, if you get frustrated or angry or irritated, you know that your mind is not enlightened, right? So that's a good indication for you. If you notice that you have a craving to tell other people that you are enlightened, you know that you're not enlightened yet, because an individual who's enlightened doesn't go around bragging, and they're not boastful and telling everyone that they're enlightened. So if somebody rolls up to you at a retreat and is like, hey, by the way, don't tell anybody, but I'm enlightened, you know right away that they're not enlightened, right? Because they're bragging, they're boastful. If you're enlightened and you're so peaceful, like, why are you coming around here? Like, why are you telling me about it? Like, go be peaceful, go be joyful. You don't need to tell me about it, right? What do you want me to do? Bow down to you? Do you want some kind of admiration? Like, what do you want from me? Because if you want something from me, you're not enlightened, right? So if you're going around bragging and boastful that you're enlightened, you're not enlightened yet. Or if you notice that there's complacency in the mind, where you're lacking motivation, you're lacking enthusiasm, ambition, if you're lacking vigor and vitality, if you're lacking this initiative to do something, your mind is not yet enlightened. An enlightened being is going to have ambition and enthusiasm, but they're motivated through wise decision making, not through craving, desire, attachment. They're not chasing after the objects of their affection. They're gradually working towards their goals, objectives, or interests. So complacency would be all the way over here, where the mind's dull and lethargic. That's not the middle way. So if you're chasing, your mind's not enlightened. You're going to be experiencing conditioned feelings. But if your mind's all the way over here, where you're dull and lethargic and complacent, your mind's not enlightened there either. The middle way is where you can have ambition and enthusiasm and work towards your goals through wise decision making. Okay, so this is how you know you're not enlightened. Any questions on what enlightenment is and what it's not? Yeah, feel free to ask anything you guys would like.
Yeah, I just want to know if I understand correctly. So basically, do we say that every person at some point will get to an enlightenment, like after a certain amount of being reborn? Or is that a case?
It's up to the individual. It's an individual's choice. They have the potential to get to enlightenment. In the human realm and in the heavenly realm, these are the two realms you have the ability to get to enlightenment. In the hell realm, afflicted spirit, or the hell realm, the animal realm, afflicted spirit realm, you can't get to enlightenment in those existences, but you can be reborn into the human realm or the heavenly realm, where you'll have opportunity to get to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha encouraged people in the human realm to not be complacent, because this is actually the ideal realm to be able to get to enlightenment, because you experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. So you kind of have built-in motivation, because you experience those painful feelings and neither painful nor pleasant, and you don't like them and you would like to get away from them. Where in the heavenly realm, even though they can get to enlightenment, they tend to be unmotivated, because they only experience pleasant feelings. They don't experience the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant. And the beings in the lower realms, their mind is such that it can't be cultivated to the point of enlightenment in those existences. So there's the potential for everybody to get to enlightenment, and that would be wonderful. And that's what I would like to see. Some people might call that heaven on earth, right? If everybody's walking around being loving and kind and compassionate and polite and respectful and generous and sharing with each other, nobody's angry and frustrated. It'd be wonderful if everyone in the world was enlightened. That's not what we're going to see during this lifetime. And if you do the work that you need to do in this lifetime, you'll never see that. But everybody does have the ability to get to enlightenment if they decide to learn and practice, and they have the capability to intellectually understand, then they could get to enlightenment. But there's some people, like in this life, that, let's just say they've had some kind of accident. Maybe they've had trauma to the body and to the brain, and their mind doesn't function in the same way. Maybe they're incapable of intellectually learning. Even though they're in the human realm, they don't have the faculties to be able to learn and get to enlightenment in this existence. But they could potentially get to enlightenment at death, Or, of course, they could be reborn into another existence and get to enlightenment there. So it would be wonderful if everyone got to enlightenment, but whether that occurs or not is up to each individual to decide.
Right. And just follow up on that. So basically this realm of hell and heaven, is this something that Buddha taught? Like there are these realms where you can end up, I guess. And basically once you are there, it's not possible for you to get out? Or is it like a permanent thing? Like, for instance, I know I'm neither, but Christianity has this, you do bad things, you end up in hell, and that's it for you. Is this the same?
Yeah, it's not the same. The Buddha did teach the hell realm, and he taught the heavenly realm, but he explained that these places are not permanent. And you'll see that tomorrow when we talk about the universal truth of impermanence. You can see the world around you is constantly changing. There's nothing around you that is permanent. So a lot of people are believing that heaven and hell are permanent, but that's not the truth. That's the false reality. That's the unknowing of true reality that the mind has, and the mind's clinging to that because of its lack of wisdom. But you can look around the world and you can independently verify the universal truth of impermanence, and you can understand that the hell realm is not permanent and the heavenly realm is not permanent, because the Buddha did teach these different realms, and he taught that they are not permanent and that beings are moving in and out of those realms all the time. And there's also nobody that's sending you to these realms. That's what a lot of these other traditions will teach, is that there's a being like God that is judging you and then sending you to a good place or a bad place. That's not actually true. It's your own choices and decisions that lead to any result that you experience. So it's like a sequence of events. And at the end of this life, based on the condition of your mind, then there's a cause that's going to lead to an effect or a result. And you're going to either be reborn into a certain realm based on the decisions that you've made, or if you've gotten to enlightenment, again, based on the decisions that you've made, now there's not going to be rebirth in the cycle of rebirth at all. So the Buddha did teach about these things because you need to understand them. Because, like, for example, if you started having memories of your past lives, this could really shake you up if you didn't understand that that's what that was. If you started having vivid memories of being murdered, for example, and they kept reoccurring over and over and over again in your mind. And of course, you haven't been murdered in this life because you're still alive. So that could really shake you up if you didn't understand that that was past life memories. But when you understand that that's what that is, you can just let it go and just be like, hey, I don't need to pay attention to that. That's in the past. That's not this life any longer. So the Buddha taught these things because it impacts you. And you might even end up seeing hell beings or heavenly beings or ghosts. And if you don't understand that this is the way the world truly is, it could really shake you up. And some people can even hear communication from these beings, because it's not like the hell realm is deep down in the core of the earth or the heavenly realm is way up in the sky somewhere. These beings are all in the same time and space as us. And some people can see them and some people hear communication from them. And if you didn't understand that this is the way the world truly is, it could really shake you up when you're experiencing those things. But if you understand that that is the way the world is, you can just be completely stable and steady and just understand, like, oh, there's a ghost. No big deal. I'm not hurting it. It's not going to hurt me. I don't need to be scared of it, right? It's just not every single being has physical form. If every single being had physical form, that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that some beings have physical form and some beings don't. And that's impermanence. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hello? My question is about the 4 stages of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
So, technically, it's about the cycle of reborn. Also, we can reach enlightenment on one life if we do the training and the teachings. So, does that mean that we can go through the 4 stages on the same lifetime?
Yes, you can go through all 4 of these stages in one lifetime. And the way that I suggest you look at these 4 stages of enlightenment is look at it as a personal growth plan. That's really what it is. The Buddha is laying it out for you and showing you how to eliminate these fetters and in which order that you generally pay attention to eliminating them on. Because, for example, let's get back to here. You see restlessness, right, where the mind is overactive. You wouldn't be able to eliminate that if you hadn't already eliminated central desire. Right? So if you're busy working on eliminating restlessness and you're not paying attention to central desire, you'll never eliminate your restlessness, because that's what's the underlying cause of the restlessness is the central desire. But once you get the central desire out of the mind, there'll still be a little bit of restlessness in your mind, and now you can focus on that. So this is a personal growth plan. And of course, there are distinct stages that you're going to notice improvement to your mind because of it. And that's why we help you to understand it, so you know what stage you're in, so that now you'll know, like, okay, if you're in the first stage of enlightenment and you know that with 100% certainty, now you know what you need to be focusing on, which is this. And you've already been focusing on that all the way through and to a certain degree, but now you can really focus on it, right? And then once you eliminate that, now you know, like, okay, now I've eliminated these, now I can really focus on these down here. And you've been already working on those to a certain degree up to that point, but now you can really put it under a microscope. So I would suggest you think of it as a personal growth plan, and the Buddha just laying out for you a sequence that you need to pay attention to as you're making progress on the path. Mm-hmm.
When you use the word realm, are these mental states or dimensions of being?
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Yeah, so we refer to them as realms, but the way you might think about it is just like a category of beings, right? So in the human realm, we have different ethnicities, right? And that's within our human realm. But then beyond that, at a higher level, there's distinct realms or distinct categories of beings, and they have certain qualities in terms of their physical appearance or not, and their capabilities of their mind. Right? So in the animal realm, in the hell realm, in the afflicted spirit, and the human and heavenly realm, there's different aspects of what's going on in the mind. So I teach this when we get to chapter 20 in our book. I think that's where I teach it. So we're almost there in the group learning program, right, that I'll teach you the 5 realms and what an individual experiences in each one of those realms. In terms of your mind and the capabilities of the mind and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
When you hear all and when you see all these different points from the mind and how bad it actually is, so the mind is your biggest enemy at the end. If you can control your mind,
yeah,
like in these stages, you're on a good way.
Yes.
But why is it like this? Why is it so bad like this? Let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an idea, but
Why is it like that?
Yeah. Only because of this?
That's the main underlying cause, because we just don't understand what we don't understand in the unenlightened state. We don't even know these things exist. We go around firmly believing that other people are causing us to be angry, right? But it's because of this ignorance this all continues. So yeah, this is kind of very eye-opening when you start diving into this, that you're like, oh my goodness, I thought I knew what this world was all about. And here's this whole aspect of the mind, this being, that you have no idea about. Because when we grow up, we learn about how to clean this body. Right? Our parents taught us to take showers and baths and brush our teeth and comb our hair and stuff like that, put on deodorant. And we learned that. And by the time we were 12, 13, 14, we'd pretty much mastered that, right? And we continue to do that today. But nobody ever taught us how to clean our mind, because we didn't grow up in a society that understood that. Here in Thailand, they understand it to a certain degree, right? And so people will practice it, and you see quite a bit of peacefulness and joy within the Thai society, because they're not just cleaning their body, they're cleaning their mind too, and they understand that. But none of us grew up that way. So now as an adult, we have the opportunity to learn it. And now as you clean up your mind, now you'll experience a completely different way of life, because your mind is like the CPU of the computer. It's the central processing unit. Everything you experience in life is coming through your mind. So if you have a polluted mind, it's like looking out at the world through a dirty window. And now everything looks dirty. But when you clean up your window, it's like, whoa, hey, the sun's shining. Those bushes are pretty green. I really like that color. That's nice, right? So if you walk around the world with a polluted mind, of course people have stress. Of course they have anxiety. Of course they have guilt and shame and fear, because the mind hasn't been cleaned. Because it's just like if you walked around for a few years without cleaning your body, you'd feel pretty uncomfortable. So if you walk around all these years without cleaning the mind, of course someone feels uncomfortable. And this is why we have a proliferation of difficulties in the world, because people are walking around with a polluted mind and not even realizing, because of the ignorance. They don't even realize. People will just go around and be completely fine to blame other people for all the experiences that they're having in life. So what the Buddha is helping you to be able to do is focus inward and realize that anything you're experiencing is coming from your own mind, and now fix that and you've won. So in terms of a war or a battle or enemies, if you win this battle, if you win this war, you've won everything. Yeah. All right. I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay. So now it's 12:20, and we take a little break here to go have lunch. So if we could come back from lunch at 1:45, that gives you almost an hour and a half. It gives you about an hour and 20 minutes for lunch. Is that okay for you guys? Yeah, everyone's good? Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys at 1:45, where I'm going to teach you Buddhist chanting, and that's going to help you with your meditation to get more benefit out of that. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys afterwards. Okay? Sawadee Kap.